morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for February's edition of Health Bytes with Region 3. We are pleased to welcome this month's speaker, Eva Marie Carney. Eva Marie Carney is the founder and executive director of the Kwek Society, a nonprofit that provides puberty education to Indigenous students and period care to Indigenous students and community members across the United States and Canada's Ontario province. Since its inception, the Kwek Society has distributed close to 1.3 million period care items and almost 16,000 puberty education books and signature moontime bags to address first periods. Eva is a dual citizen of the United States and the citizen Potawatomi Nation and lives in Arlington, Virginia. In addition to her work for the Kwek Society, she is a member of the legislature of the Shawnee, Oklahoma-based citizen Potawatomi Nation and works as a humanitarian immigration lawyer through Just Neighbors, which is a nonprofit law firm. She is one of the dozen expert panelists providing input on menstrual health section on the online platform Our Bodies, Ourselves Today, which provides up-to-date, trustworthy, and inclusive information about health, sexuality, and well-being. Eva earlier was a partner in Washington, D.C. law firm and an assistant general counsel with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Eva graduated from the University of San Francisco with a BA in history and received her JD from Stanford Law School. In today's Health Bites, our speaker will give a presentation on celebrating moon times, flipping the script on period poverty, and standard puberty education. So thank you so much for being our guest speaker this morning, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I really appreciate the invitation to come and speak to everyone. And as I'm listening to my intro, I realize I really need to cut that down. So I'm sorry for that. And just so people know, my native nation is the citizen Potawatomi Nation. It's a sometimes difficult word to scan and pronounce. So just gonna give a shout out to another citizen Potawatomi that I see here in the audience, Pam Vrooman, who is one of the board members of the Kwek Society. And one thing I wanted to say right off the bat is that the work we do, getting out those 1.3 million period supplies since we started, et cetera, is not done just by one person. We have a board of 9 people, and just last week we hired our first part-time employee. So we're very excited about these developments, but I wanted to make sure to recognize Pam, and also make sure that all know that this is not a one-person band. So just to get started, I wanted to start by talking to you about how we got started. And Margie, if you can move to the third slide, that would be great. There you go. So this was the epiphany that I had in 2017. More than 1 in 4 students leave school when they get their periods, or just don't go at all because they don't have period products. This, to me, was an incredible statement. I read an article about particular students who were on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and it was reportage where the students were indicating that about half of the kids in school who menstruated didn't have enough tampons or pads. And to me, that was a revelation, because I knew that period poverty, as we call it, and I think that term we'll talk about more, is something that is more widely discussed and known about today than it was in 2017. But I knew that there were issues in other parts of the world, not in the industrialized world, not in America. And it just was a shock to me, and it caused me to take immediate action. Can we go to the next slide? And that action was to, well, first of all, to call the school where these students were and to talk to them about their need for supplies, and then to start looking around to see if what the impact was of this issue. Were there other Native communities, other Native students who were also at risk or suffering period poverty, and who was addressing the issue? And what I found was that there's, even in 2017, there was a spattering of organizations that were addressing the issue of needed period supplies for women who were incarcerated, for menstruators who were unhomed, who were on the streets. And from time to time, folks were addressing, through things like diaper banks, the need for period products as well as diapers. But I did not find any group that was specifically addressing Indigenous menstruators' needs. And because I am an Indigenous woman, I thought that it was important to take a stand and to take action. And so that was when I, as a lawyer, was able to put together a Virginia nonstock corporation with a board and bylaws, et cetera, and get nonprofit status for our organization that we call the Kwek Society. And Kwek means women, as is said on this slide. And one thing I want to emphasize is that while we're named the Women's Society, we address period needs for all menstruators, and we strive to use inclusive language on our website and in all communications with those that we serve. Next slide, please. So we are focused on Indigenous communities. And what that means is that when we reach out to schools and nonprofit organizations, after-school clubs, and other groups that have substantial Indigenous populations, we get pads, tampons, liners, and underwear, along with educational materials about puberty, and what we call our signature Moontime bags, which are filled with supplies. And we get those to all who are in need. So if we are addressing a community's needs, we address everyone in that community with needs, not just the Indigenous students. So for example, a school we support in Oklahoma City has, maybe 20% Native students. All the students who are in need of supplies in that school will receive supplies, not just Indigenous students. So one of the reasons that I found that I should step forward and do this work is that when I have seen organizations that are addressing Native need reach out and communicate to the world about that need, there often is a message of, oh, lo, those poor Indian people. And that was not the message that I thought would resonate with donors and foundations, or that would resonate with those we were helping. And it was nothing that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted this to be a celebratory message of dignity and recognizing the excitement and value of periods. And so I will illustrate some of that as we go along, and including just the slides. You'll see that the slides that we're using are very colorful, bright, with vibrant photos of vibrant people, of vibrant Native people, and that all is quite intentional to ensure that this is a message of excitement and celebration. I think there are probably people who are listening today who don't typically talk about periods. They're probably hearing words said that they don't, usually hear in polite company. And that's one of the things that we are seeking to address and regularize, is that, talking about periods has meant that issues like period poverty are reaching legislators. They're reaching people who need to understand about these issues. And so we we regularly use those words, and you're going to hear a lot of them today. Next slide, please. So just to ensure that everyone is on the same page with respect to the definition and sort of the topic today, what is period poverty? Period poverty is, it describes the struggle that many lower income menstruators face when trying to afford period products. And that includes everything from the pads and tampons to pain medication and underwear. It also refers to the increased vulnerability economically that menstruators face due to the financial burden of having a period. And by that, I mean the impact of missing school, missing work, and missing other life activities. And, to state probably the obvious, and to quote from the United Nations Population Fund in May of 2022, difficulty affording menstrual products can cause menstruators to stay home from school and work, with lasting consequences on their education and economic opportunities. One thing I cannot emphasize enough is that period poverty doesn't just affect menstruators in developing countries. It affects people in wealthy, industrialized countries. This is not a presentation about the fact that period poverty is a native health problem. Period poverty is a poverty problem. And I would venture to say that it is affecting folks in your own communities. I live in Arlington, Virginia, which is a very well-off community as a general matter, but I know for a fact that there are a number of students who are eligible for free or reduced price lunches in their public schools, and those students are at risk for period poverty. Next slide, please. And so just to set this up a little bit more, when I talked at first, I mentioned the Pine Ridge Reservation as being the source of this first reporting that I had come across about period poverty. Since we've started our work, really in early 2018, we have schools and community-based organizations that we support that are coast to coast in the United States. We support schools in Maine, as well as schools in Oregon and many states in between. And we also address period poverty in the Ontario province of Canada. So next slide, please. Let me introduce you to some real world students who are prompting this work. Now, these pictures are not, these are not photos of the students who were interviewed in the article that I had read. And we'll get to a couple photos later of students that we are helping. So the first story was a student who said, her name is Dominique Amiote. She was 17, and she said that she herself always kept extra tampons in her locker because there were students that she knew didn't have them. She also reported that her friends just wouldn't come to school when they had their periods. Next slide, please. Now, this was the truly horrifying report, which was, she also noted that there was at least one of her friends, she mentioned, was considering getting pregnant, because if she got pregnant, she wouldn't need the supplies for a while. That will just, everybody, I think, will have the same reaction to that idea and the fact of a teenager not really understanding the ramifications of, of that kind of thinking. And so next slide, please. And so again, I want to emphasize that this is not just an Indigenous problem. It's a problem that affects American students and community members nationwide. Of course, centuries of systematic impoverishment, racism, and isolation of Indigenous Americans by the federal government have made period poverty a harsh reality for many Indigenous menstruators. And so while we started on the rural reservation of Pine Ridge in South Dakota, we have expanded to serve students in suburbs, cities, and many other reservations as well. Next slide, please. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how we're approaching this work, and what we think we're doing is this reference to flipping the script. So, I'd earlier mentioned this, how many people don't talk about periods, don't share information about periods. And we think that that is part of the reason that period poverty is in effect here in the United States. And so we take a very different approach, which is to give students, lots of information about puberty, focus on supporting and celebrating their periods, and doing that through a unique Indigenous lens. So we give them puberty education books. We also gather and share traditional teachings about periods from a variety of different Indigenous traditions. And those teachings really center the young menstruator as a powerful and contributing member of the community. Next slide, please. So we're really celebrating periods, and one of the ways that we do that is by sharing with students the traditional idea of a period being one's moon time. And so that inspiration had come from teachings that we as Indigenous women have been taught, sometimes later in life, not raised traditionally, but teachings that have been shared with us. And they're eloquently expressed in a particular book that we share widely with those we support, which is called Moontime Prayer. And it's available on Amazon. And I would encourage you all to take a look and at that book. So it offers a grounded, really sacred way of thinking about periods. And so, for those of you who may not be familiar, in many North American Indigenous cultures anyway, the moon is called Grandmother Moon and is connected to women's sacredness, as well as to the roles and responsibilities that come with being a woman. The moon is the weaver of the tides and the leader of the waters of the earth. And Grandmother Moon governs the waters inside women as well. And so one of these watery experiences, as many of us think of it, is known as moontime, or the menstrual cycle. And so once every 28 days, the fullness of Grandmother Moon illuminates the night sky. This is also when moontime occurs for menstruators. And as the Moontime Prayer book puts it, every 28 days, the Grandmother Moon's vibrant red blood flows to nourish the Earth Mother. And so that's an excerpt from a book by Dr. Cindy Gaudet, Moontime Prayer. As I mentioned, I think it's a beautiful book, and we we make it a point to ensure that those we support have access to that book and that information. And so we take that next slide, please. We take that moon time theme and include it and use it very actively in our work. So early on, there was a reference to our signature moontime bags. Those are shown here in the slide and held by one of the lovely young ladies that we support with supplies in the photo here. And so what they are cotton envelopes that are sewn by our supporters. So they're sewn by people around the country who get them to us, and they're stuffed with 3 pads, 2 liners, and we include a card of celebration, and I'll show you that in a minute. But you can see it here in the picture with the vibrant colors of that we use on our cards and on our website. We have a reference to a link to parts of our website that share the traditional teachings on that card, and we are proponents of these moontime bags to teachers and administrators, particularly those who are introducing puberty to their students for the first time, with the idea of being that these are small, portable, can be put in a locker, a purse, or a backpack, and they're pretty. They make one feel that cared for. We've heard, and for some of the young ones, they are definitely shy about carrying around supplies. And so they like that these don't scream, "I'm carrying around period supplies." And so they have been, very, very successful. And let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the front of the card that we include with our supplies. It includes an excerpt from a poem by the amazing Indigenous poetess Joy Harjo. Remember the sky that you were born under? Know each of the star's stories. Remember the moon, know who she is. And so that to us is an emphasis of the cultural tie to menstruation, moontime. And we really have found that students and community members, because these also can be gifted to unhomed people, or people who are in different community being served by different community organizations. We supply them to them as well, but they really are, we believe, like a lovely community gift because they can't be bought. They are made free of charge by people that just care about our mission and want these gifts to go to those we support. And the volunteer participants who make these are mostly Indigenous women, and I think it's an opportunity for them to reflect on their own moontime journeys, and really they very much delight in helping the young ones particularly. If we can go to the next slide. And so on to the some of the responses that we've gotten to the work that we're doing. And this is probably my favorite of all notes that we've received from students. That's from 2 8th graders at Wyoming Indian schools. Thank you for making us girls feel comfortable at our school by sending personal items to be here at school. We appreciate it. And comfort at school. What could be better when you're navigating your first experience with menstruation? And so that to us says it all. And again, looking at this note, it reflects that these young students aren't particularly comfortable with using the words period or period supplies or tampons or pads, what I've been using throughout this presentation. They prefer to use the word feel, personal items. That's something that, we understand, but we're always, seeking to kind of push that envelope and have them learn more and feel more comfortable with the fact that they have their period. Next slide, please. Here's another note that came from a young student saying she was glad she came to school that day because she didn't have any supplies at home, and then remembered that there were some in the library. And so I think the reference here to the pretty bag is to our noontime bag. And again, reflecting, now the boys on the bus won't know what's in the bag. That's the reality for a lot of the young ones, that they don't want people to know about their period at this point in their lives. But also, another thing that's reflected here is the fact that she was able to take a whole package of pads. So that is one of the things that's very important to our work, which is to make sure that if there are students who need help with periods, that they have what they need at home as well. And so that means that we are regularly resupplying, making sure that, particularly when school opens, before a winter break, when school starts again, and before summer break, we get enough period supplies into the school or after school program so that kids feel free to take home what they need. And maybe that means they're taking home supplies for a mother or a sister or another family member. And we're good with that. We want to be sure that that they have what they need, and that they have that ability to share with others in their family circle who need support. In fact, right now we are in the middle of a major resupply effort because we've gone through the winter holiday. There's been another month of school, and so we always make it a practice of providing like some Valentine's candy or small gifts for the teachers and administrators and the students that we support in the schools. And so we're doing that right now. Next slide, please. And then there's the issue of the types of supplies that we get. And we think this is also very much tied into our message and effort to promote periods as a positive thing, as a time for celebration, and to ensure the dignity of those we help. This is a quote from a young woman who actually had her counselor call us. She found out about us, and she was on the phone from the beginning with the counselor advocating for supplies. This is a school. Now, many of the schools, just to make it clear, many of the schools that we support do have some period supplies available in the school to support students who don't have them or are surprised when they have their periods. Those tend to be the type of pads that you get in a vending machine at a rest stop when you're traveling on the highway, something that's in a cardboard box or a wrapped tampon that is very large and unwieldy. The students aren't comfortable using those supplies, and they're speaking up. So this is one of those students who says that what was available in the nurse's office were like pillow pads. Other people say that they're like, these types of supplies are like diapers. And so what we love is when students become active and start asking for the supplies that they need. And so I think our work also, as the students see that there are people out there who are funding these supplies or sending them the supplies, who are making the noontime bags, they see that there are those to support them, and they themselves are becoming activated and calling out the inequity that student menstruators experience. It's interesting to hear from them and to hear them have the epiphany that only half of the student body needs to fund this very expensive need, and to hear them speaking up about why these supplies aren't in the school bathrooms rather than, secreted away in the nurse's office. Why aren't they next to the toilet paper and soap that is available without question, and asking for modern and comfortable solutions to their periods? Can we have the next slide, please? And so just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking a bit more about the traditional teachings part of our program. So, and the information that we offer there. So I would encourage folks to look to our website for this. It's under the Learn or Educate part of our site. And what we do is sort of put a call out to folks that we know, Indigenous folks that we know, to share teachings that they have. And what we're finding is that more communities are bringing back traditional ceremonies to celebrate young persons' first periods, and that many of those teachings really reflect something very different from the standard approach to first periods in North American culture. And by that, I mean that in those traditional teachings and celebrations, the community knows that that menstruator is having the first period and celebrates and acknowledges that in a public way. And that's not the standard North American experience, certainly. And also, I want to put a call out to anyone who may be Indigenous or have close ties to Indigenous communities. If you have access to traditional teachings about periods, and we haven't shared those on our site to date, please do get in touch. That would be terrific. Next slide, please. So we also supply basic puberty education books. These are standard books, nothing particularly challenging or something that's hopefully nothing that a school board would want to ban. They're available through Amazon, and we send books for both sexes. We have the puberty books on our list for boys, and the boys book and the girls books. And this is something that we create a list and offer it to educators, and they let us know what titles they would like, or if they want titles. There are some schools that say they have what they need in their libraries and nurses' offices, and there are some that just said that they aren't comfortable in accepting the books, and we leave that there because we operate in many different communities at this point. As I mentioned, 14 states and the Ontario province of Canada, with many different school structures and school board philosophies, and we make things available, and we hope that they will be accepted. And sometimes for smaller groups, we have a small personal book that we offer. But when I say for smaller groups, we do have to pay a fair amount for those books, and so our budget being limited, we can't offer those to everyone that we're supporting. And of course, we would love to. And then if you look to our website, you'll see that we also have a link to a sex education site called amaze.org, which features animated videos and allows for curation by parents of particular videos or educators. So We think of that as like a local local curation of puberty education. Next slide, please. And this is something that I think is great, really excited about just having added this to our site. It's definitely kid-friendly content. It's a YouTube animated video called Menstruation Animation. We are definitely intending to build out the education portion of our site as our time and resources permit. One of the things that we'd love to do is to include a period tracker that is downloadable, that could be downloaded onto paper and on the website. And also, if we can figure out a way to do this, have a period tracker and maybe a little bit of puberty education information inserted into our Moontime bags along with that, along with the card that we're already using. So the idea of this that I'd had from the beginning is that we all know that most kids have cell phones. And so having period education available through our site, a trusted site that's curated and that can be viewed by a student, at their leisure and in private as they wish to take a look at it, we think is a very valuable thing to offer them. And so at this point, let me just talk a little bit about our impact and share some data with you. So we have grown year over year, and we started very small with that one school. And one of the things that we think is very important is to keep up our commitments to those with whom we've already partnered. Our ultimate goal is to be put out of business by the legislation that we're seeing introduced community by community and state by state to provide period products in public facilities, in the bathrooms of public facilities, but we certainly aren't there yet. Since 2018, we've delivered now, actually, because we've just made some more large distributions, we're well past 1.3 million supplies. And in 2022, we estimate that we served 7,500 people. But you know what? It's really just, we're really just getting started in many ways, and it really is just a small raindrop in a very large ocean. And so, COVID was an interesting time for us. We actually were quite busy during COVID because we had a lot of community partners and school partners who were distributing period supplies along with meals and along with student homework. Some of the schools were actually driving the products around on school buses to students' homes or to particular areas where students would meet. We also were our supporters became interested in sewing masks in the early part of COVID, and so we distributed many masks that were made by our supporters. And one point of pride that we have is that the Navajo Rangers, the native Diné people who patrol and assist with law enforcement on the Navajo reservation, were wearing our masks during COVID. So, now, of course, schools are back in session, and we're getting, requests for, many more supplies than we had earlier. And it's challenging to keep up with that, but we want to also not just keep up with our the current folks that we're helping, but to keep saying yes when we get a new request to help a school or community group. And so right now, I think we have 101 what we call partners. So a partner is an individual school or community group. So for example, in a large, wide-ranging school district in New Mexico, there are 16 schools. 15 of those schools we get supplies to. So we count that as 15 partners. If there is a school stack that we're helping, so elementary school, a middle school, and a high school, and and certainly we're hearing that students as young as students who are third grade are getting their periods and needing the supplies, and puberty education is starting third grade or fourth grade. So we're serving elementary schools as well as middle and high schools. So if there's 3 schools we're helping in a district, we'll count those as 3 partners, just so people are clear on how we're presenting our data. In 2020, so in the early pandemic, we had 49 partner schools and organizations, and we delivered close to 500,000 period care items. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's just some statistics, and you'll see these on our website since our inception. So that's almost 16,000 individual noontime bags sewn by an individual donor, which just makes my heart sing. 99 partners. Now we're up to a couple more already. And then next slide, please. And then the number of supplies has increased as well. And so just to show you a few of the students' photos that we support, when we enter our agreement, when we agree to assist a school or community-based organization, we have them sign a 1-page agreement. It's very short. It basically says, we're giving you these supplies. Supplies are donated to us by sometimes by manufacturers, sometimes by individual donors. We otherwise buy them. We're using other people's money, and we intend for you to get these supplies only to give these supplies out, not to resell them or trade them for something else. I mean, pretty basic. Also, we ask for photos because let's face it, raising money, people want to see the impact. People want to see the faces of the people who are being helped, and then they just make us so happy to see these pictures. And there are many times in which we'll get pictures where we don't have the lovely faces of those we're supporting, and that's fine too. We say just do what makes the students comfortable, but the photos also are sort of like a proof of life concept idea, because we aren't anywhere near most of the schools that we're supporting. We're not certain that the supplies have arrived. And so the photos are a way to ensure that that the supplies have arrived, and just knowing that that students like these have what they need is the huge payoff. And then just wanted to share with you a couple of the notes that we've received from the trusted adults who are conduits into schools and community groups. This one is from a school nurse in Oklahoma, in a lovely way noting that we're helping to gracefully transition young menstruators into this new time in their lives. Next slide, please. And this is from one of our newer school partners, social workers up in Sitka, Alaska. We're actually supporting 2 Sitka schools as well as the native village of Marshall, Alaska. So individual menstruators in that native village who otherwise would pay exorbitant prices for supplies are getting our period supplies. But this particular social worker had just been assigned a new role, which was to provide puberty education instruction to students, and she wasn't quite sure how to go about it. And our connection happened at just the right time, where we provided her with books and resources and the Moontime bags and other support, and she has just run with those. And if you're interested, there on our website, there's a short video that she made that's explaining how she used our supplies and other support to enhance puberty education lessons for her students. So I'd invite you to take a look there. Here's another quote about this being a game changer for students, that they don't have to worry about supplies. Sometimes they weren't attending school regularly because they didn't have supplies. And so, the statement of giving students the confidence and security that they need to be successful at school is really everything. I mean, that's what we are about. And just staying in school and being successful at school are our critical goals. So last week we got a note from a high school student who said we were her heroes because we stepped up to get her supplies that she particularly wanted. It's an adorable note because she cites to a particular type of pad, a very absorbent pad, and said that this is the only type of pad that she can use and feel comfortable, and that they are so expensive. And lo and behold, they were stacked in the bathroom for her because we had sent them. I think they had come from a pad drive that one of our supporters had done for us, and we mailed them out to her school. So the idea that students can confidently navigate their periods and just go about their active and sometimes stressful in this society lives is the big payoff. So we can't end without telling you how you might help us and providing some calls to action. And so there's a couple of different ways that we really welcome support. And you can let us know if any or all of these might resonate with you. The first one is that as if anyone on this listening to this presentation now or in recording has contacts at schools with significant Indigenous populations, like 20%, I would say is significant, that don't readily have the supplies that we offer, please let us know and please put us in contact with those schools. What about contacts at public or family foundations that might be willing to fund us? We need funds. If you have media contacts who might cover us, that would be terrific. We found that when an article about us, appears in a, like we recently were covered by Global Citizen. We were recently covered by the Citizen Potawatomi Nations newspaper and by Native News Online, that there's a bump that happens and people read the article, sometimes, reach out to help us in a variety of ways, or just spread the word about us. And so that's another way of just sharing our social media posts and the web links that we send out. And you can go online and sign up for our newsletter to keep in contact. I actually saw on that one of the participants today is the editor of our newsletter, Paige Willett, and also she is the vice president for our board of directors. So hi, Paige. Do you have the capacity to help us through a product drive at work or a fundraiser? We have lots of resources to share to help you do that. And the last thing I would say is, if you, individually can talk about this issue, talk about period stigma, talk about period poverty, share that information with people, take away the stigma of talking about periods by doing so. And also, reach out as you will or are able to those who can create budgets that will provide these supplies in a modern supplies products that are appropriate and dignified for those that need them, and have those available in public facilities throughout the country, just as toilet paper and soap are available without question. And with that, last slide, please. And so here's just our website, kweksociety.org, and also my contact details and social media links. And I'd love to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. And we do actually have a couple questions in the chat. So it looks like someone asked, do you also teach them how to track, document their cycles so they don't run out of supplies?
We are not in the schools. Our products are in the schools, but we do not go into the schools and do that kind of education. We are directing more of our time and effort right now to thinking through how we can provide some period tracker information to the students and community members we support, so that they will have that, and that, particularly if they have it as part of the Moontime bags, they're going to have it right at hand and be able to use it. At an earlier point, we had a period tracker that was created by UNICEF that was downloadable to a cell phone. We had a link to that and information about that on our website, but we took that down out of concern about tracking. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, if you just Google period tracking and privacy, you will learn about some of the concerns that have been raised over the last year about using those personal period trackers on a device.
And then someone else asked, do you get supplies from manufacturers? Have you reached out to public schools for students to make packs for community service credit?
So manufacturers, yes, we do. We are a member of an organization called the Alliance for Period Supplies, and it has a special relationship with Kimberly-Clark. And so we do, as a result of that and through that membership, have access from time to time to significant amounts of period products coming from U by Kotex. So we do get those. We also have some lovely relationships with a couple of smaller, typically women-owned companies. One is called Be Prepared Period, that gives us significant discounts on organic pads. Another is called August, which has donated substantial portions of its profits from its sales of its supplies from time to time. And so we're always on the hunt for those relationships. What we've found is that we have had to get to a size, and we are now at that size that companies want to consider assisting us. And so one good example of that is this past summer, August of 2022, the Kwek Society was recognized as a period hero, one of 50 period heroes in 50 states. We were recognized as a Wyoming period hero by Walmart and the Always brand as part of a campaign that they ran together to talk about period poverty issues. And as a result of that, we got many supplies, and we're able to part those out to schools in Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Wyoming. And as for doing community projects, we are encouraging students in their own individual schools to do community projects. We have that information available on our website. We do get contacted by individual students. One of our lovely interns actually got a group of Girl Scouts up in Massachusetts to do sewing projects for us during on Indigenous Peoples Day. And she orchestrated that. We encourage that, but we do not do a blast out to all schools asking them to assist us. We would love it if people who are listening to this program spread the word about us to the schools groups that they know of, and maybe gin up those kinds of efforts for us.
Wonderful, thank you. And we have two, I'm going to combine these two questions. I think this is the last one we have time for. But people were asking about, if you talk a little bit more about the training, if you had any trainings that are tailored to trans students, or how you provide those products to trans and gender diverse people.
We don't have specific training directed at trans students. We absolutely encourage by use of our terms menstruators and not girls and not women, that, you know, those with periods are the folks that we want to help. And, you know, I understand the impetus for the question. But again, we are not in the schools. We are not directing how the products are distributed. I try to get in a conversation early on about model distribution methods that we have seen, and I like to share some of that information with people. And for example, having, you know, sort of having the products in locker rooms, having the products in all bathrooms, having the products in the gender neutral restroom, most definitely. But you know, I certainly cannot tell you that that all the schools are following that model. There are schools that are distributing through nurse's office where you've got to go into the nurse, or through the principal's office where you have to go talk to the person that's at the front desk in the principal's office. So we've got a ways to go, but we absolutely are, you know, are committed to meeting the period supply needs of all people who menstruate.
So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and special thanks again to Eva Marie Carney for joining us and sharing your expertise with us. We look forward to seeing everyone at next month's Health Bytes for Region 3. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.